malicious compliance helicopter MIL bought house next door, so I made her regret it. The moving truck in my driveway wasn't mine. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee mug frozen halfway to my lips, watching burly man unload floral printed furniture that looked suspiciously familiar. My heart sank as I spotted the gaudy pink armchair I'd suffered through countless Sunday dinners staring at. Honey? I called to my husband Jake, who was getting ready for work upstairs. Did you know someone bought the Henderson place? What? His voice drifted down, distracted. Oh yeah, Mom mentioned it sold pretty quick. Cash buyer, apparently. The coffee mug slipped from my numb fingers, shattering against the tile floor. Because there she was, Diane Peterson, my mother-in-law of exactly 4 months, directing the movers like a general commanding troops. She wore her signature pearl necklace and that triumphant smile she got whenever she'd successfully meddled in something. Jake. I screamed. He thundered down the stairs, tie half-nodded, taking in the broken mug and my expression. What's wrong? Are you hurt? I pointed wordlessly out the window. Jake's face went through several interesting color changes, confusion, recognition, and finally a sickly green that matched our kitchen walls. Oh, he said weakly. That's unexpected. Unexpected? I grabbed his shoulders. Your mother bought the house next door without telling us. She's going to be living 30 feet from our bedroom window. I'm sure she has good reasons. Don't. I held up a hand. Do not defend this. Do you remember what happened at our wedding? Jake's Adam's apple bobbed. Of course he remembered. Diane had worn white, insisted on approving our menu, and literally tried to rearrange our seating chart during the reception because she knew better how to organize our friends. She just wants to be close to family, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Close to family? Jake, she has a key to your apartment that you never got back. She does your laundry. She still calls you baby boy in public. You're 29 years old. A sharp rap on our front door interrupted my meltdown. Through the glass, I could see Diane's perfectly coiffed silver hair and her pageant wave. Surprise, she trilled when Jake opened the door, pulling him into a suffocating hug. Isn't this wonderful? Now I can help with everything, cooking, cleaning, decorating. And when you two finally give me grandbabies, I'll be right here to help raise them properly. The word properly hit like a slap. As if Jake and I were incompetent children who needed constant supervision. Mom, this is a lot, Jake managed. You could have told us you were looking at houses in our neighborhood. Oh, baby boy, I wanted it to be a surprise. Besides, you would have tried to talk me out of it, and this is clearly what's best for everyone. She breezed past him into our kitchen, already assessing and finding fault. Goodness, what happened here? This mess would never happen if you had proper supervision, support. I watched my husband's spine dissolve like sugar in rain as his mother began reorganizing our spice rack without permission. 4 months of marriage, and I was already competing with a woman who'd had 29 years to perfect her manipulation techniques. But as I stared at the broken coffee mug on the floor, something crystallized in my mind. Diane thought she'd won by buying that house. She thought proximity would equal control. She had no idea what she'd just started. Within 24 hours, I understood the true scope of Diane's invasion. She had a key made to our house. Not requested, made. I discovered this when I came home from work to find her in my kitchen, reorganizing my pantry while a pot of her famous beef stew simmered on my stove. Oh good, you're home, she chirped, not even looking up from alphabetizing my canned goods. I noticed you were running low on proper seasonings, so I picked up a few things. And this stew will be much more nutritious than whatever processed nonsense you had planned. I'd had salmon marinating in the fridge. Expensive salmon that was now nowhere to be seen. Diane, I said slowly, how did you get in? Oh, I had copies made of Jake's keys. Just in case of emergencies, you know. What if one of you got locked out? What if there was a fire? I'm just being practical. The casual violation of it stole my breath. She hadn't asked. Hadn't even mentioned it. Just decided our home was now her home too. You can't just. Can't what, dear? Help family? Her smile was saccharine. I'm sure once you adjust, you'll appreciate having someone mature to guide you through married life. That evening, Jake came home to find me sitting at our dining table with a legal pad, furiously scribbling notes. What's all this? He asked, loosening his tie. Research. I didn't look up. Did you know our HOA has very specific regulations about noise levels, property maintenance, and unauthorized modifications? Jake's face went carefully neutral. Sarah, what are you planning? Nothing illegal. I finally met his eyes. Your mother wants to be neighbors? Fine. But she's going to learn what being neighbors actually means. You can't go to war with my mother. Watch me. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. She had keys made to our house without permission. She threw away our dinner. She's treating our home like her personal project. And you're just going to let her? She's family. I'm your family too. I'm your wife. Doesn't that count for anything? Jake ran both hands through his hair, looking miserable. Of course it does. But you know how she is. Fighting her just makes everything worse. No, Jake. Enabling her makes everything worse. There's a difference. As if summoned by our raised voices, a knock echoed from our back door. Through the glass, I could see Diane holding a covered dish, her face pressed against the window like a child at a candy store. Yoo-hoo. I brought dessert. And I wanted to discuss the landscaping. I noticed your flower beds need some attention, and I have such wonderful ideas. I looked at my husband, waiting for him to set a boundary. Any boundary. But he just sighed and moved toward the door. Don't, I said quietly. He paused, his hand on the doorknob. Sarah. If you open that door and let her steamroll over us again, if you choose her comfort over your wife's sanity one more time, I will make sure she regrets buying that house. And you will regret not standing up for your marriage. It wasn't an ultimatum. It was a promise. Jake stared at me for a long moment, conflict clear on his face. Behind him, Diane's knocking grew more insistent. Baby boy? Is everything all right in there? I saw the lights on. My husband's shoulders sagged in defeat as he reached for the lock. The sound of the deadbolt sliding open felt like a door closing on something else entirely. But as I watched Diane bustle into our kitchen with her unsolicited dessert and unwanted advice, I realized something liberating. I was done asking for permission to defend my own home. It was time to get creative. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a leaf blower at 6:47 a.m. Not just any leaf blower, an industrial-grade monster that sounded like a helicopter landing in our backyard. I stumbled to the window, squinting against the early morning light, to see Diane in full gardening regalia attacking perfectly clean pavement with the enthusiasm of someone declaring war on nature itself. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, watching her methodically blow non-existent debris from her driveway onto our lawn. Jake groaned from bed. "What's that noise?" "Your mother's new hobby, apparently." By 7:15, she'd moved on to hedge trimming. Electric hedge trimming. Right outside our bedroom window. The rhythmic buzzing mixed with her off-key humming of show tunes created a symphony of suburban torture. I threw on clothes and marched outside, my bare feet slapping against the cold pavement. "Diane." "It's 7 in the morning." She looked up from butchering what had been a perfectly shaped bush, safety goggles perched on her forehead like some demented DIY warrior. "Oh, good morning, dear. Early bird catches the worm." I wanted to get started on improving the neighborhood's curb appeal. People are sleeping. Well, they shouldn't be. Productive people are up with the sun. She read the hedge trimmer for emphasis. "I'm just being a good neighbor, making sure everything looks proper." I noticed she'd already improved the small fence line between our properties, trimming back the climbing roses I'd spent 2 years nurturing. Bare, wounded stems poked through the chain link like broken fingers. "You cut my roses." "Oh, those scraggly things?" They were growing over onto my side. "Property rights, dear. I'm sure you understand." The casual destruction of something I'd cared for hit harder than it should have. Those roses had been my first successful gardening project, a small victory in making this house feel like home. Now they look like a crime scene. "I'll be doing some tree trimming later," Diane continued cheerfully. "That oak is dropping leaves into my gutters. So inconsiderate of previous owners to plant it so close to the property line." The oak tree was on our side. Fully on our side, planted decades before either of us lived here. But I could see in her eyes that property lines were merely suggestions when they interfered with her vision of suburban perfection. I spent the rest of the day researching city noise ordinances while Diane's home improvement symphony continued. Apparently, construction noise was prohibited before 7 a.m. and after 9 p.m. on weekdays. She'd started at 6:47, I had her dead to rights. But when I called the non-emergency line, the dispatcher's response deflated my righteous anger. "Ma'am, we'll send someone out, but unless it's an ongoing issue with documentation, it's really a civil matter." "Have you tried talking to your neighbor?" Talking to Diane was like reasoning with a steamroller. She'd smile, agree that consideration was important, then do exactly what she wanted while insisting it was for everyone's benefit. That evening, Jake found me in our backyard, staring at the mangled rose bushes. "I'm sorry about your flowers," he said quietly. "They're not just flowers, Jake. They're mine. In our yard." She had no right. "I know." He sat on our back steps, looking older than his 29 years. I talked to her about the noise. She said she didn't realize. She realized. She just didn't care. Maybe if we set some ground rules. She doesn't follow rules. She makes them. For everyone else. I turned to face him. "This morning was a message, Jake. She's showing me exactly how much power she thinks she has." Through Diane's kitchen window, I could see her on the phone, gesturing animatedly. Probably planning tomorrow's assault on neighborhood tranquility. But as I watched her, an idea began forming. Diane wanted to play property line games? Perfect. Two could play that game. And I was about to become a very dedicated student of every single regulation in our HOA handbook. The HOA handbook was my new Bible. I picked up a copy from the community office that afternoon, along with every addendum, bylaw revision, and architectural guideline published in the last 5 years. The stack of documents was 3 inches thick and filled with a kind of bureaucratic minutiae that most people ignored. Most people weren't at war with their mother-in-law. "Listen to this," I said to Jake over dinner, flipping through the pages. Section 4.7b, all exterior modifications, including but not limited to paint color changes, landscaping alterations, and decorative additions, must receive written approval from the Architectural Review Committee before implementation. Jake poked at his leftover pizza without enthusiasm. "Sarah, where are you going with this? Did your mother submit an application before she installed those garden gnomes?" Through our dining room window, I could see Diane's latest additions to her front yard, a collection of ceramic gnomes arranged around a wishing well that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. They stared at our house with painted smiles that felt somehow menacing. "They're just gnomes." 23 gnomes, Jake. I counted. Along with that wishing well, 3 bird baths, and what appears to be a miniature windmill. I found another section and read aloud, "Yard decorations shall be tasteful and limited to no more than 5 items visible from the street." Jake set down his fork. "You're really going to report my mother to the HOA? "I'm going to follow the rules. You know, those things that apply to everyone who lives here?" I flipped more pages. "Oh, and look at this gem. Holiday decorations may be displayed 30 days before and must be removed within 14 days after the respective holiday." It's March, Jake. Why does she still have Christmas lights up? The lights in question weren't subtle. Diane had outlined her entire roofline in multicolored bulbs that she turned on every evening at exactly 6 p.m., casting rainbow shadows across our bedroom wall. When I'd mentioned it yesterday, she'd claimed they were year-round mood lighting for her seasonal depression. Maybe she just forgot. She didn't forget. She told Mrs. Rodriguez they were staying up permanently because every day should feel like Christmas when family is close. I closed the handbook with a satisfying thump. But my personal favorite violation is the unauthorized fence extension. That morning, I discovered Diane had moved the small decorative fence between our driveways approximately 6 inches onto our property. Not enough for most people to notice, but enough to claim our prized Japanese maple as part of her landscaping vision. 6 inches isn't worth fighting over, Jake said weakly. It's not about the 6 inches. It's about the principle. She's testing boundaries to see what she can get away with. I stood up, gathering the dishes with more force than necessary. And apparently, the answer is everything, because her son won't stand up to her. The kitchen window provided a perfect view of Diane's evening routine. Like clockwork, she emerged at 7 p.m. to water her garden gnomes, actually water them, as if they were living creatures that might wither without attention. She positioned herself to face our house during this ritual, offering enthusiastic waves whenever she caught sight of us. You know what the worst part is? I continued, scraping plates with aggressive efficiency. She's not even trying to be subtle anymore. This afternoon, I caught her taking pictures of our garbage cans. Pictures? Apparently, we're not following proper recycling protocols. She's documenting evidence for the HOA. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your mother is building a case against us while simultaneously violating half the community guidelines herself. Jake joined me at the sink, his reflection in the window looking as defeated as I felt. What do you want me to do, Sarah? She's always been intense. I want you to care more about your wife's happiness than your mother's feelings. Before he could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. But when I opened it, my blood pressure spiked. Asterisk, hi sweetie. Got your number from Jake. Just wanted to let you know I'll be doing some power washing tomorrow morning, might be a bit noisy. Also, I noticed your car has been parked crooked in your driveway. The HOA handbook says vehicles must be properly aligned. Just looking out for you. Zoxo, Mom Diane asterisk. She'd signed it Mom Diane. As if I'd agreed to that relationship upgrade. I showed Jake the message, watching his face cycle through embarrassment, frustration, and resignation. She means well, he said finally. That's when I knew I was truly on my own in this fight. But as I stared at those smug garden gnomes through the window, I felt something shift inside me. Diane wanted to play HOA games? Perfect. She had no idea she was about to face someone who'd actually read the rulebook. The HOA complaint form was surprisingly therapeutic to fill out. I sat at my kitchen table the next morning, documenting every single violation with the precision of a war crimes prosecutor. 23 unauthorized garden gnomes. Christmas lights in March. Fence encroachment. Unapproved wishing well installation. I even included timestamps and photographs, because if Diane wanted to play documentation games, I'd show her what proper evidence looked like. But as I sealed the envelope, my phone rang. Jake's name flashed on the screen. Sarah, what did you do? His voice was tight with panic. Good morning to you too, honey. I'm fine, thanks for asking. My mother is crying. Actual tears. She says you're trying to get her evicted. Through my window, I could see Diane in her front yard, gesticulating wildly while talking to Mrs. Chen from 3 houses down. Her performance included dramatic hand gestures and what appeared to be dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. I filed an HOA complaint about legitimate violations. That's not the same as. She thinks you hate her. I don't hate her. I hate that she moved next door without telling us, made copies of our keys without asking, destroyed my roses, and is systematically trying to take over our lives. I watched Diane's theatrical display continue. And now I hate that she's playing victim instead of just following the same rules as everyone else. She's family, Sarah. Stop saying that like it's a magic word that excuses everything. A knock at my front door interrupted the argument. But this wasn't Diane's usual cheerful rapping, this was an official, measured knock that made my stomach drop. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in a navy blazer holding a clipboard. Behind her stood Diane, wearing her most wounded expression and a black dress like she was attending a funeral. Mrs. Peterson? The woman's smile was professionally sympathetic. I'm Jennifer Walsh from the HOA board. I understand there's been some confusion about community guidelines? I opened the door, hyper-aware of Diane's satisfied smirk behind the mediator's shoulder. There's no confusion. I filed a complaint about legitimate violations. Of course, and we appreciate residents who care about community standards. Jennifer's tone suggested she'd handled countless neighbor disputes. However, Mrs. Peterson here has some concerns about your adjustment to community life. My adjustment? Diane stepped forward, clutching her handkerchief. I just want us to be a happy family. But Sarah seems so angry all the time, and I'm worried about the hostile environment she's creating. The audacity stole my breath. She'd made herself the victim and me the aggressor in one masterful stroke. I've also received reports, Jennifer continued, consulting her clipboard, about confrontational behavior, harassment over minor property issues, and complaints about normal home maintenance activities. Normal home maintenance at 6:47 a.m.? Mrs. Peterson was simply doing yard work during permitted hours, Diane interjected sweetly. I had no idea Sarah was so sensitive to the sounds of suburban life. I realized with growing horror that Diane had gotten to the HOA first. While I'd been carefully documenting violations, she'd been spinning a narrative of a difficult daughter-in-law who couldn't handle having loving family nearby. Perhaps, Jennifer suggested, we could work out a neighborly compromise? Mrs. Peterson is clearly eager to maintain community standards, and I'm sure you both want to resolve this amicably. Behind Jennifer, Diane's expression was pure triumph. She turned my legitimate complaints into evidence of my own unreasonableness. Worse, she positioned herself as the reasonable party trying to keep the peace. What kind of compromise? I asked, though I already knew I'd lost this round. Well, Mrs. Peterson has agreed to be more mindful about early morning activities. And perhaps you could be more understanding about normal settling in activities for new residents? Translation, Diane would make token gestures while I was expected to shut up and accept whatever she did. I think that's very reasonable, Diane said, practically glowing. I just want what's best for everyone. As I watched Jennifer Walsh drive away and Diane practically skip back to her gnome army, I realized I'd made a critical error. I'd tried to fight Diane using official channels, not understanding that she'd already poisoned that well. But sitting in my kitchen afterward, staring at my unused HOA complaint, I felt something crystallize. Diane had won this battle through superior preparation and strategic manipulation. Fine. If she wanted to escalate, I'd learn to play her game. I just needed to get better at it. The very next morning, I discovered the true scope of Diane's revenge. My car wouldn't start. Not unusual for a 7-year-old Honda, except when I popped the hood, I found a polite note tucked under the windshield wiper. Asterisk noticed your car battery looked corroded. Took the liberty of disconnecting it for safety. You're welcome. Your caring neighbor asterisk. She disconnected my car battery. My car battery. On the morning I had a crucial presentation at work. But that wasn't even the worst part. As I stood in my driveway, phone pressed to my ear trying to explain to my boss why I'd be late, I noticed the audience. Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street was watching from her window. The Johnsons next door had found urgent reasons to check their mailbox. Even Mr. Kim was suddenly very interested in examining his front lawn. They were all watching me have a meltdown in my pajamas at 7:30 a.m. Car trouble, dear? Diane emerged from her house wearing a perfectly coordinated jogging outfit, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine about active seniors. I could give you a ride. I was just heading out anyway. The offer was delivered with such saccharine sweetness that I could practically feel my teeth rotting. She'd sabotaged my car, then positioned herself as my rescuer. And with half the neighborhood watching, refusing would make me look like the unreasonable one. That's very kind, I managed through gritted teeth. Diane's car was a pristine white SUV that smelled like vanilla air freshener and disappointment. The radio was tuned to a talk show about traditional family values, and she'd somehow managed to program my workplace address into her GPS before I'd even gotten in. I hope you don't mind, she chirped as we pulled out of the driveway, but I mentioned to a few neighbors that you've been under a lot of stress lately. New marriage, adjusting to homeownership, it's so much pressure for someone your age. My hands clenched in my lap. What exactly did you tell them? Oh, nothing specific. Just that you seem overwhelmed, and we should all be extra patient and understanding. She patted my knee with maternal condescension. I explained that you're not used to community living, coming from apartment life. Some people just need more time to adjust to being good neighbors. She'd poisoned every relationship I might have built in the neighborhood. With surgical precision, she painted me as unstable, antisocial, and immature, all while positioning herself as the understanding family member trying to help me integrate. The HOA meeting is next Thursday, she continued conversationally. I volunteered to host it at my house since I'm so centrally located. We'll be discussing community standards and the importance of neighborly cooperation. You should come. It would be good for you to get more involved. Translation, she was hosting a meeting about me, in her house, where she could control the narrative completely. I work Thursday evenings. Oh, what a shame. Well, I'll be sure to represent your interests. Family looks out for family, after all. When she dropped me off at work, she rolled down her window for a final parting shot. Don't worry about getting home, sweetie. I'll pick you up at 5. We can stop by the auto parts store together. I know so much more about cars than most women your age. I spent my lunch break calling every Uber and taxi service in town. Diane had somehow managed to make me dependent on her for transportation, and I'd rather walk 10 miles than give her another opportunity to play savior. But as I sat in the break room, stress-eating vending machine chips, a text popped up from Jake. Asterisk mom said your car broke down. So sweet of her to help. See? She really does care about you, asterisk. I stared at that message for a long time. Jake genuinely believed his mother was being helpful. He couldn't see the chess game she was playing, couldn't recognize the systematic way she was isolating me and controlling the narrative. That's when I realized the most terrifying truth of all. Diane wasn't just trying to control me. She was trying to turn my own husband against me. And she was winning. The auto parts store clerk looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Ma'am, there's nothing wrong with your battery, he said, hooking up his diagnostic equipment for the 3rd time. Connection's clean, charge is perfect. Someone just loosened the terminals. I knew that. What I needed was documentation. Could you write that down? On your letterhead? I guess? But why would someone? Family drama, I said grimly, watching him scribble notes on official shop paper. Can you also note the time and date you're checking this? Armed with my evidence, I called Jake during his lunch break. Your mother sabotaged my car. That's ridiculous, Sarah. Why would she? Because she wanted to force me to depend on her. She disconnected the battery terminals, left a fake safety note, then coincidentally appeared to rescue me. I was pacing in the parking lot, my voice rising. I have documentation from the auto shop proving there was never anything wrong with it. A long pause. Maybe she genuinely thought. Stop. Just stop defending her. My free hand clenched into a fist. Jake, she told the neighbors I'm mentally unstable. She's hosting an HOA meeting about community standards that's really about me. She's systematically isolating me from everyone in our neighborhood. You're being paranoid. The word hit like a slap. Paranoid. The same dismissal every woman heard when she tried to call out manipulation that was too subtle for others to see. Fine, I said quietly. Don't believe me. But when she destroys our marriage, remember that I tried to warn you. I hung up and stood in the auto parts store parking lot, feeling more alone than I had since moving to suburbia. My own husband thought I was losing it. My neighbors thought I was the problem. And Diane was orchestrating it all with the skill of a master puppeteer. That evening, I came home to find a casserole on my doorstep with another note. Asterisk thought you might be too stressed to cook. Also scheduled a spa day for us this Saturday, my treat. We need some girl time to work through this tension. Soxo, Mom Diane asterisk. The presumption was staggering. She'd sabotaged my morning, manipulated my transportation, undermined my reputation, and now wanted to force bonding time like we were old friends with a minor misunderstanding. But as I stared at that note, something clicked into place. Diane's greatest strength was also her weakness. She couldn't help herself. She had to control everything, had to be the center of every narrative, had to win every interaction. That compulsion was going to be her downfall. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. First to the spa, where I politely canceled the appointment Diane had made without my consent, explaining that I'd never authorized it. The receptionist's confusion was palpable. Apparently, Diane had insisted I was just too overwhelmed to handle making my own appointments. Then I called Jake's sister Emma, whom I'd met exactly twice but who lived 3 states away and had her own complicated relationship with Diane. She did what to your car? Emma's voice sharpened with interest. Oh honey, that's classic mom. She once rearranged my entire apartment while I was at work, then acted hurt when I wasn't grateful. Finally, someone who understood. The key, Emma continued, is documentation. Mom's smart enough not to leave evidence of the big stuff, but she can't help herself with the small manipulations. You need to start recording everything. As if summoned by our conversation, I saw Diane's silhouette appear in her kitchen window, phone pressed to her ear. Probably calling Jake to discuss my increasingly erratic behavior. But for the first time since this war began, I felt something besides helpless rage. I felt strategic. The documentation phase began immediately. I installed a security camera app on my phone and started recording everything. Every interaction, every helpful gesture, every boundary violation got timestamped and saved to cloud storage. If Diane wanted to play the evidence game, I'd give her more evidence than she could handle. The first real test came Saturday morning when I discovered her in my backyard at 6:30 a.m., pruning my hydrangeas. "Oh, good morning, sweetie," she called out cheerfully, not even pausing in her unauthorized gardening. I noticed these poor things were getting so overgrown. Don't worry, I know exactly how to shape them properly. My phone was already recording from my back pocket. "Diane, those are my plants. In my yard." "Well, of course they are. I'm just helping. You've been so busy with work, and gardens need proper attention." She gestured with her pruning shears like a conductor directing an orchestra. My mother taught me everything about hydrangeas. They need a firm hand. The firm hand had already destroyed most of the blooms I'd been looking forward to all spring. But this time, I didn't lose my temper. I just kept recording. "I need you to stop and leave my yard, please." "Oh, Sarah, don't be silly. We're family. Besides, I'm almost finished." She snipped another branch with aggressive efficiency. "Jake mentioned you've been having such a hard time keeping up with house maintenance." "I'm just lending a hand." Jake had mentioned no such thing, but that wasn't the point. The point was the casual gaslighting, the boundary violations, the assumption that her desires trumped my property rights. All of it now preserved in high definition. "If you don't leave my yard immediately, I'm calling the police for trespassing." Diane's pruning shears finally paused mid-snip. "Trespassing? Sweetheart, I think you're overreacting. It's just gardening between family members. We're not family. You're my husband's mother, and you're in my yard without permission, destroying my property." The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Diane's helpful smile faltered for just a moment, revealing something much colder underneath. But then her mask slipped back into place so smoothly I almost questioned what I'd seen. "Well," she said, gathering her tools with wounded dignity, "I can see you're having one of your difficult mornings. I'll just let Jake know you threatened to call the police on his mother for trying to help beautify the neighborhood." After she left, I stood among the butchered hydrangeas, holding my phone with its precious video evidence. For once, I had proof. Not just of the property destruction, but of her manipulation tactics, her gaslighting, her complete dismissal of clearly stated boundaries. But my moment of triumph was short-lived. 20 minutes later, Jake called. "Sarah, Mom is really upset. She says you threatened her with arrest for doing yard work." I closed my eyes, already exhausted by the predictable pattern. She was in our yard without permission, cutting up my hydrangeas at 6:30 in the morning. She was trying to help. "Jake, I have video. Do you want to see exactly what happened, or do you want to just believe your mother's version?" Silence. "Then, you recorded her?" The way he said it made me sound like the unreasonable one. Like documenting someone's trespassing and property destruction was somehow more offensive than the actual trespassing and property destruction. "Yes, I recorded her. Because every time something happens, it becomes my word against hers, and you always believe her." That's not true." "Prove it. Come home and watch the video." Another pause. "I can't leave work right now, but Sarah, maybe you should think about how this looks. Recording people, threatening arrest. Mom's worried about your mental state." And there it was. Diane's masterpiece. She'd managed to turn my evidence gathering into proof of instability, my boundary setting into aggression, my self-defense into offense. I was fighting a chess master while playing checkers, and she was already 3 moves ahead. The package from Amazon arrived Monday morning while I was getting ready for work. I hadn't ordered anything. Inside the plain brown box was a collection of self-help books, managing stress in marriage, anger management for women, and building healthy family relationships. Each one had a gift receipt showing they'd been ordered by someone with the initials DP. The note was written on Diane's monogrammed stationery. Asterisk, thought these might help with your recent struggles. Knowledge is power. Love and support, Mom Diane asterisk. I stared at the books, my coffee growing cold in my hand. She'd sent self-help books about anger management to my house. Where the mailman could see them. Where Jake would find them when he got home. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Asterisk, Mom mentioned she sent you some books. That was thoughtful of her. Asterisk. She'd already told him. Of course she had. Now when he saw them, it wouldn't be why is someone sending you anger management books. It would be, oh, those books Mom mentioned to help with your stress. The narrative was set before I'd even opened the package. But the books weren't the worst part. As I was loading them back into the box to return them, I noticed Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street lingering by her mailbox, watching my house with undisguised curiosity. She waved when she caught me looking, but her smile was different now. Cautious. The kind of smile you give someone you're not quite sure about anymore. Diane had been busy. I spent my lunch break calling the neighbors, the ones whose numbers I could find online, anyway. Mrs. Rodriguez was just stepping out. The Johnsons weren't available. Mr. Kim's wife answered but seemed uncomfortable, ending the call quickly after I introduced myself. Finally, Mrs. Chin from down the street actually talked to me. Oh honey, she said after I explained I was just trying to introduce myself properly as a neighbor. Diane mentioned you were going through a rough patch. She's so worried about you, said you've been having episodes. Episodes. My hands tightened on the phone. What kind of episodes? Well, she didn't want to gossip, but she's concerned about your stability? She mentioned you've been acting erratically, making accusations, having paranoid thoughts about family members trying to hurt you. The chess game was complete. Diane had systematically contacted everyone in the neighborhood, framing her manipulation as concern for my mental health. Every frustrated reaction I'd had, every boundary I'd tried to set, every piece of evidence I'd gathered, it all became proof of my instability in her carefully crafted narrative. Mrs. Chen, has Diane actually seen me having these episodes? A pause. Well, no, but she's family. She knows you best, doesn't she? That evening, I sat Jake down with my laptop, determined to show him the video evidence from the hydrangea incident. But as I pulled up the file, my stomach dropped. The video was corrupted. The audio played fine, you could hear our entire conversation, hear Diane's boundary violations and manipulative responses. But the visual was nothing but digital static. The sound quality is good, Jake said carefully, listening to his mother's voice casually dismissing my property rights. But without the visual proof of her actually cutting my plants, it was just audio of me sounding increasingly upset at someone doing unclear yard work. She destroyed evidence, I said, though I knew how that sounded. Sarah, videos corrupt sometimes. It doesn't mean. Jake, listen to what she's saying in that recording. Really listen. He did listen, his face growing more troubled with each manipulative comment. For a moment, I thought I was finally getting through to him. Then his phone rang. Diane's contact photo, a professional headshot from her church directory, filled the screen. Hi, Mom. No, we're fine. What dinner? Tomorrow? Oh, you already bought groceries? I watched my husband's spine dissolve in real time as his mother orchestrated another obligation we hadn't agreed to. The trap was closing around me, and my own husband was helping her set it. The dinner invitation wasn't really an invitation. She already bought the groceries, Jake explained as he hung up, avoiding my eyes. It would be wasteful not to go. I stared at him from across our living room, laptop still open to the corrupted video file. She bought groceries without asking if we were available. That's not the same thing as us agreeing to dinner. It's just dinner, Sarah. No, it's not just dinner. It's her manufacturing an obligation, then making you feel guilty for not fulfilling it. It's manipulation, Jake. But he was already moving toward the stairs, the conversation effectively over in his mind. She's trying to make an effort. The least we can do is meet her halfway. Halfway. As if I hadn't already been dragged far beyond any reasonable middle ground. That night, I lay awake listening to Diane's house. She had a habit of playing classical music while she cooked, always the same Vivaldi compilation, always at precisely 9 p.m. The sound drifted through our bedroom window, a nightly reminder that she was 30 feet away, probably planning tomorrow's boundary violation. But tonight, the music was different. Louder. And it was coming from multiple speakers placed strategically around her backyard, creating a surround sound effect that made it impossible to ignore. I checked my phone, 11:47 p.m. Jake, I whispered, shaking his shoulder. Do you hear that? He groaned, rolling over. Hear what? The music. It's past midnight. She probably just forgot to turn it off. But the volume increased as we whispered, the violin swelling into a crescendo that vibrated through our walls. This wasn't forgotten music, this was intentional. I got up and looked out the window. Diane's house was dark except for her kitchen, where I could see her silhouette moving around, very much awake and very much aware of what she was doing. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, * sorry about the music, sweetie. Having trouble sleeping since the move. You know how stress affects us sensitive types. Sweet dreams. Mom Diane *. She was awake. She was deliberately playing music loud enough to keep us awake. And she was already establishing her excuse, stress from moving, sensitivity, the same victim narrative she'd perfected. Jake, she's doing this on purpose. Sarah, you're being paranoid? I'm being paranoid? I showed him the text. Look at the timestamp. She sent this right as I got up to check the noise. Jake squinted at my phone screen, his face troubled but not convinced. Maybe she saw your bedroom light come on. The music continued until 2:17 a.m. I know because I watched the clock, documenting everything. When it finally stopped, the silence was almost more jarring than the noise had been. The next morning, I found Jake in the kitchen, looking as exhausted as I felt. Rough night? I asked pointedly. I guess the music was pretty loud, he admitted, pouring coffee with shaking hands. For a moment, I felt hopeful. Maybe he was finally starting to see the pattern. Then his phone chimed with another text from Diane, * baby boy. So sorry about last night. I took some new sleep medication and it made me so confused. Could you stop by before work? I'm worried it affected my judgment about other things too. What if I've been acting strangely all week? I'm so embarrassed. *. I watched Jake's face transform as he read it. The exhaustion melted away, replaced by concern for his mother's well-being. I should check on her, he said, already reaching for his keys. Jake, don't you see what she's doing? She kept us awake all night, and now she's making you feel responsible for fixing it. She's worried about medication side effects. That's legitimate. She's manufacturing another crisis that requires you to rescue her. But he was already heading toward the door, choosing his mother's fake emergency over his wife's real concerns. I stood in our empty kitchen, surrounded by the scent of his abandoned coffee, finally understanding the true scope of what I was fighting. This wasn't just about boundaries or manipulation. This was about who Jake would choose when forced to pick sides. And I was losing. The emergency family dinner was set for 6 p.m. sharp. I arrived at Diane's house to find candles lit, her best china set out, and soft jazz playing at a respectful volume, a stark contrast to last night's midnight orchestra. Everything was perfectly choreographed to look like a loving family gathering, complete with a welcome home banner hanging across her dining room. Welcome home? I asked Jake quietly as we stood on her doorstep. She probably means welcome to the neighborhood, he whispered back, but his voice lacked conviction. Diane answered the door in a flowing floral dress that belonged in a 1950s magazine spread, her arms open wide for dramatic embraces. My babies. Come in, come in. I've made all of Jake's favorites. The house smelled like pot roast and manipulation. Every surface gleamed with fresh cleaning, and family photos I'd never seen before were strategically placed throughout the living room, pictures of Jake's childhood, his college graduation, family vacations that predated me by decades. The message was clear, this was Jake's real home, and I was just a recent addition to his established family story. Dinner smells amazing, Mom, Jake said, falling effortlessly into the role of devoted son. Oh, it's nothing special. Just a little comfort food for my stressed children. Diane's eyes lingered on me with that familiar mix of pity and satisfaction. Sarah, sweetie, you look so tired. Are you getting enough sleep? The woman who'd kept me awake until 2 a.m. was asking about my sleep with genuine-sounding concern. I caught my reflection in her hallway mirror and realized she was right. I did look terrible. Dark circles, tense jaw, the hollow-eyed appearance of someone losing a war of attrition. I've been having some trouble sleeping, I said carefully. Oh, I understand completely. I had the worst night myself. That new medication just scrambled my brain entirely. I'm so embarrassed about the music. Jake was such a sweetheart to come check on me this morning. She squeezed his arm possessively. I don't know what I'd do without my baby boy looking after me. Dinner was a masterclass in psychological warfare disguised as family bonding. Diane had prepared every dish from Jake's childhood, complete with stories about teaching him to cook, helping with homework, nursing him through illnesses. Each anecdote reinforced the same theme. She was the woman who truly knew Jake, who'd shaped him into the man he'd become. Remember your senior prom, honey? When that awful girl broke up with you right before the dance? I stayed up all night making your favorite cookies and telling you that someday you'd find someone who truly appreciated you. Jake smiled at the memory, reaching across the table to squeeze his mother's hand. You always knew how to make everything better. A mother's intuition never fails, Diane said, her eyes finding mine across the table. We always know what's best for our children, even when they can't see it themselves. The threat was delivered with such maternal warmth that Jake completely missed it. But I felt it like ice water in my veins. Halfway through the main course, Diane's phone rang. She glanced at it with theatrical surprise. Oh my. It's the HOA president. I should probably. She answered with breathless apology. Jennifer. Yes, I'm so glad you called. Actually, this is perfect timing. Both Jake and Sarah are here for dinner. Could you hold on just one moment? She covered the phone with her hand, addressing us like we were children who'd been caught misbehaving. Jennifer wanted to follow up on some neighborhood concerns. Apparently there have been more complaints about tensions affecting community harmony. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. More complaints from who? Well, she didn't want to say specifically, but it sounds like multiple residents have noticed some concerning patterns. Diane's voice dripped with reluctant concern. Should I put her on speaker so we can all discuss this as a family? The trap was perfect. Refuse, and I'd look like I had something to hide. Agree, and I'd be defending myself against vague accusations while sitting in Diane's house, surrounded by symbols of Jake's real family loyalty. Of course, I heard myself say, though every instinct screamed to run. But as Diane reached for the speaker button, I realized something crucial. She'd made one small mistake. Her phone screen was still visible, and there was no active call. She was about to have a completely fabricated conversation with the HOA president, and I was the only one who could see the evidence. The question was, would Jake believe me when I called her out? I stared at Diane's phone screen, my heart pounding as the truth crystallized. No active call. No Jennifer on the line. Just Diane about to perform a one-woman show designed to humiliate me in front of my own husband. Actually, I said, standing abruptly, I can see your phone screen from here, Diane. There's no call. The silence that followed was deafening. Diane's finger hovered over her phone, her mask of maternal concern flickering like a broken television signal. Jake looked between us, confusion clouding his features. What do you mean there's no call? He asked. Look at her screen, Jake. Look at it right now. Diane's recovery was swift but not swift enough. She quickly pressed a button and held the phone to her ear. Jennifer? Oh dear, I think we lost you. Let me call you back later. She ended the non-existent call with theatrical disappointment. How frustrating. These phones are so unreliable. Show Jake your call log, I pressed, my voice steadier than I felt. Sarah, that's quite enough, Diane said, her sweet tone developing a sharp edge. I understand you're under tremendous stress, but accusing me of fabricating phone calls is really concerning behavior. Jake was looking at me like I'd started speaking in tongues. Sarah, what's gotten into you? Your mother was about to pretend to have a conversation with the HOA president to make me look bad. She's been orchestrating this entire dinner as some kind of intervention. I gestured at the perfectly staged room, the strategic photos, the calculated timing. None of this is coincidence, Jake. It's all performance. That's absolutely ridiculous, Diane huffed, but I caught the flash of panic in her eyes. Why would I need to fabricate anything when there are genuine concerns about your adjustment to community life? What genuine concerns? Name one specific complaint from one specific neighbor. The question hung in the air like smoke. Diane's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. For the first time since I'd known her, she was scrambling for words. Well, the important thing is that we address these issues as a family. There are no issues, I interrupted. There are no complaints. There's just you, creating problems so you can position yourself as the solution. Jake set down his fork with deliberate calm. Sarah, I think you owe my mother an apology. Even if there was some confusion about the phone call. Confusion? The word exploded out of me. Jake, she was about to stage an entire conversation. She had the phone to her ear with no active call, ready to play both sides of a fake discussion about my supposed neighborhood problems. You don't know that. I saw her screen. There was no call. Ask her to show you her recent calls list right now. Ask her. Diane clutched her phone protectively against her chest. I don't think I should have to prove anything to someone who's clearly having some kind of episode. And there it was again. Episode. The magic word that transformed my legitimate observations into symptoms of instability. Jake was looking at me with something that might have been pity, and I realized with sick certainty that even caught red-handed, Diane had managed to make me look like the problem. My voice was too loud, my accusations too wild, my evidence too circumstantial. I want to go home, I said quietly. Sarah, we haven't finished dinner, Jake started. I want to go home. Now. As we walked the 30 feet between Diane's front door and ours, Jake's disappointment radiated like heat from pavement. I'd embarrassed him in front of his mother. I'd been unreasonable, paranoid, aggressive. I'd also been completely, provably right. But in Diane's world, being right didn't matter nearly as much as appearing wrong. The security camera arrived the next morning via overnight shipping, my own purchase this time, not another of Diane's thoughtful gifts. I installed it myself while Jake was at work, positioning it to capture our front yard, driveway, and crucially, the property line between our houses. If Diane wanted to play the evidence game, I'd give her all the evidence she could handle. The camera caught her first violation within 3 hours. I watched from my kitchen window as she casually moved our newspaper from the driveway to her porch, then carried it inside like it was the most natural thing in the world. Mail theft, a federal offense, though I doubted anyone would prosecute over a daily paper. But it wasn't about the newspaper. It was about the pattern. The camera caught her second violation an hour later when she used our garden hose to water her front flower beds, then left it running across our driveway like she owned the place. Again, minor in isolation. Significant as part of a larger campaign. By evening, I had a highlight reel of petty property violations, each one deniable on its own but damning in aggregate. More importantly, I had proof that I wasn't imagining things, wasn't being paranoid, wasn't having episodes. I was being systematically harassed by someone who knew exactly how to stay just under the radar of serious consequences. Jake came home to find me at the kitchen table with my laptop, organizing video files with the precision of a prosecutor building a case. "What's all this?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already dreaded the answer. "Evidence. Your mother stole our newspaper, used our water without permission, and moved our trash cans to block our mailbox access." I turned the laptop toward him. All documented with timestamps. Jake rubbed his temples like I was giving him a migraine. "Sarah, you bought a security camera to spy on my mother?" "I bought a security camera to document what's happening to our property. The fact that your mother is the one violating it isn't my fault. She probably didn't even realize." "Jake, watch the video. Really watch it." I clicked play on the newspaper theft footage. Look at her face when she takes it. Look at how she checks to see if anyone's watching first. On screen, Diane glanced around carefully before crossing onto our property, her movements deliberate and calculated. This wasn't absent-minded neighbor behavior, this was someone who knew exactly what she was doing and wanted to avoid getting caught. Jake watched in silence, his expression growing more troubled with each violation. For a moment, I thought I was finally breaking through his denial. Then his phone rang. Diane's photo filled the screen again. "Don't answer it," I said urgently. But Jake was already swiping to accept. "Hi, Mom." "What?" "Slow down." "A security camera?" My stomach dropped. Through our window, I could see Diane pacing in her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing dramatically at our house. "She's upset about the camera," Jake said unnecessarily. "She feels like you're treating her like a criminal." "She is a criminal. She's stealing our mail and trespassing on our property." "Mom, hold on." Jake covered the phone. "Sarah, she's crying. She says the camera makes her feel unsafe in her own home." "Good. Maybe she'll think twice before coming onto our property uninvited. She's family, not some stranger you need to surveil. Family doesn't steal newspapers and use utilities without asking." Through the window, I watched Diane's performance reach its crescendo. She was pointing at our camera with one hand while dabbing at her eyes with the other, the picture of a vulnerable elderly woman being persecuted by her unstable daughter-in-law. "Mom wants to know if we can all sit down and discuss this like adults," Jake said. "Adults don't steal newspapers. Adults also don't install spy equipment without discussing it with their spouse." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Somehow, my decision to protect our property had become a betrayal of our marriage, while Diane's systematic harassment was just unfortunate family drama. "Fine," I said, closing the laptop with a snap. "Set up your meeting. But I'm bringing printed copies of every single violation, and I'm not removing that camera until she stops treating our property like her personal playground." Jake's relief was visible. "Thank you. I think if we just communicate better." "This isn't a communication problem, Jake. This is your mother refusing to respect basic boundaries and you refusing to enforce them." But as I watched him text his mother back, his face already brightening at the prospect of family harmony restored, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. Even with video evidence of Diane's calculated violations, even with proof of her manipulation and lies, Jake was still looking for ways to excuse her behavior. I wasn't just fighting Diane anymore. I was fighting 29 years of conditioning that had taught my husband his mother's comfort mattered more than his wife's reality. And that might be a war I couldn't win. The family meeting was scheduled for Saturday at 2 p.m., neutral territory at our kitchen table. But when I woke up that morning, I discovered Diane had already taken the first shot. My car tires were flat. All 4 of them. Not slashed, that would be too obvious, too criminal. These were slowly deflated, the kind of thing that could happen naturally if you really wanted to believe it. But the security camera told a different story. Diane crouched beside my Honda at 5:30 a.m., carefully letting air out of each valve stem while wearing yellow dish gloves. "Jake," I called, pulling up the footage on my phone. "You need to see this." He stumbled downstairs in his pajamas, squinting at the screen. For a moment, watching his mother methodically sabotage my transportation, his face went completely blank. "This has to be a mistake," he said finally. "A mistake?" "She's wearing gloves, Jake. She checked 3 times to make sure no one was watching. She even moved to the blind spot between our houses where she thought the camera couldn't see her." But as I watched Jake's expression, I recognized the familiar mental gymnastics beginning. He was already looking for ways to explain away what he'd seen with his own eyes. Maybe she thought they looked low on air? At 5:30 in the morning? Wearing gloves? "Jake, she disabled my car again. Just like the battery incident. You don't know that was intentional either." "Stop." I held up my hand, exhaustion hitting me like a physical weight. "Just stop. Your mother is on camera committing vandalism, and you're still making excuses for her." The meeting that afternoon was a masterpiece of manipulation disguised as conflict resolution. Diane arrived with homemade cookies and a folder full of printed materials, neighborhood newsletter articles about maintaining community peace, excerpts from family therapy websites about blended family challenges, even a printed email chain with someone claiming to be a local mediator. "I've been doing so much research about our situation," she said, spreading papers across our table like evidence exhibits. "And I think I understand the root of the problem. She positioned herself as a reasonable party seeking professional guidance while I was the unstable element disrupting family harmony. Every document supported her narrative that this was a common issue with adjustment difficulties in new marriages. According to Dr. Patterson, he's a family therapist I've been consulting with, these kinds of territorial behaviors often stem from deeper insecurities, she continued, not looking directly at me but clearly talking about me. You've been seeing a therapist about our family? Jake asked. Well, I had to talk to someone. I've been so worried about the situation, the stress of having my son's marriage in crisis. Dr. Patterson says the surveillance equipment is particularly concerning from a mental health perspective. I stared at her in amazement. She'd somehow found a therapist to validate her concerns about my territorial behaviors and surveillance equipment without mentioning her own trespassing and property destruction. Did you tell Dr. Patterson about deflating my tires this morning? I asked sweetly. Diane's cookie-holding hand paused midair. I'm sorry, what? The tires. On my car. That you let the air out of at 5:30 this morning. Did you mention that during your therapy session? Sarah, I have no idea what you're talking about. I pulled out my phone, queuing up the video. Would you like to see yourself doing it? For just a moment, Diane's mask slipped completely. The wounded mother expression vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. But then Jake spoke. Sarah, please. We're here to solve problems, not create more drama. Drama. My husband had just watched video evidence of his mother vandalizing our property, and he was calling my reaction drama. That's when I realized the terrible truth. It didn't matter what evidence I had. Jake would never choose me over her. The moment of clarity hit me like lightning. I was done. Not done with my marriage, done with this particular war. Because I'd been fighting it all wrong. You know what, Diane? I said, closing my phone and sliding it back into my pocket. You're absolutely right. Both Jake and his mother stared at me like I'd started speaking Mandarin. I have been territorial. I have been difficult. And you're absolutely right that surveillance equipment isn't the foundation of a healthy family relationship. I stood up, brushing cookie crumbs off my jeans. So I'm going to fix this. Diane's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but Jake looked hopeful for the first time in weeks. Sarah, I'm so glad you're being reasonable, she started. Oh, I'm being completely unreasonable, I interrupted cheerfully. See, I realized something important today. I can't control what you do, Diane. And apparently I can't rely on my husband to establish boundaries with you. But I can control what I do. I walked to our kitchen junk drawer and pulled out the spare key Jake had given his mother without my permission. Here, I said, pressing it into Diane's palm. You won't be needing this anymore. Sarah, what are you? I'm moving out, I announced, the words tasting like freedom. Not permanently, Jake. Just until you figure out whether you're married to me or to your mother. The silence that followed was deafening. You can't be serious, Jake said weakly. Dead serious. I'm going to stay at my sister's place for a while. You and Diane can have all the family time you want without my territorial behavior getting in the way. I turned to Diane with the biggest smile I could manage. Congratulations. You got exactly what you wanted. Your son, all to yourself. Diane's face had gone completely white. Sarah, I never wanted. Sure you did. And now you have it. No more evil daughter-in-law installing cameras or objecting to your helpful visits. Just you and Jake, living your codependent dream. I headed toward the stairs to pack, but Jake caught my arm. Sarah, please. We can work this out. We can, I agreed. When you're ready to work it out. When you're ready to be married to me instead of auditioning for the role of perfect son. I gently freed my arm. I'll be at Lindsay's. Call me when you figure out what you actually want. 20 minutes later, I was throwing clothes into a suitcase while Jake stood in our bedroom doorway looking lost. How long? He asked quietly. However long it takes. I zipped the suitcase closed. Maybe a week, maybe forever. That's entirely up to you. As I carried my bags to the car, I could see Diane through her kitchen window, pacing frantically with her phone pressed to her ear. Probably calling Jake already, ready to comfort him through this terrible abandonment by his unreasonable wife. But for the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten, peace. Let her have him. Let her do his laundry and cook his meals and make all his decisions. Let her prove to him what it actually felt like to be married to his mother instead of building a life with his wife. Because I'd finally understood the most important truth of all, I couldn't make Jake choose me. But I could choose myself. As I drove away, I caught sight of Diane in my rearview mirror, standing in her front yard surrounded by her army of garden gnomes, watching her victory turn to ash. Sometimes the only way to win is to stop playing,